Hey everyone, I'm Daniel. This is my roommate Josh, and we're doing a mukbang. It's called Two Jews and One Christmas.
Yeah, and basically, we're just gonna be eating Chinese food, playing the stereotype of how Jewish people celebrate Christmas by eating Chinese food, and we're wearing cat ears. I don't know if you've noticed, and the reason for that is because we're not very religious, and we think cat ears are cute and funny. But so we'll just call them our progressive yarmulke, and yeah, I guess we should look into more detail what we're eating exactly.
Yeah, let's get this food out. We got a lot of food tonight. From a restaurant in Queens, New York. We live in Brooklyn.
And we'll also be discussing various topics, both serious and not serious, while we're eating. So, yeah.
Alright.
So, we have beef, a scallion. No, pancakes. What are they called?
Scallion pancakes.
Yeah, scallion pancakes. We have beef, tendons and tripe. We have pork and crab buns. Not very kosher. Here, you can see. This is rice cakes and pork. Also not very kosher.
This is tofu?
Tofu and mushroom. With the lotus root.
And this is fried udon with beef, I think.
Yeah.
And they give us 3 sets of chopsticks because apparently we're eating enough for 3 people.
But we're gonna be eating with a fork and knife because we're very basic. Don't judge us too harshly. You can just judge a little bit.
So Josh and I are housing attorneys in New York City.
We work for nonprofits, so we work for tenants. We don't fuck around with landlords.
Yeah, we are not fans of landlords, but we are fans of tenants, and we represent tenants in housing court when they're being evicted.
We believe that housing is a right, and everyone deserves to live in a home, even if they can't afford to pay.
Exactly. We're both just Jewish guys. I'm from Maryland. Josh, you're from?
I'm from Canada. I've been living in the U.S. for 5-6 years. So it's been some time.
We went to law school together. We became friends in our first year, and
the rest is history.
Yeah, the rest is history. We became roommates as soon as Josh moved here. I'd been living here a little bit longer than he had.
Yeah.
Let's get started on this food. The first thing we're going to talk about is what we want to do
once COVID ends.
Post-COVID.
Yeah.
Josh, what do you want to do?
Oh God, it's been such a year, and there's been so many things I feel like I've been deprived of.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that I was really planning to do was visit my grandparents. They live in Russia.
Mm-hmm.
I was planning to visit them in August, and
you can do it.
Couldn't do it because of COVID. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to visiting my grandparents in Moscow and exploring Russia a little bit. I haven't been there since I was 12, so pretty excited to do that. What about yourself?
I think just kind of really basic things, just being able to go out and feel safe, use the subway, go to parks, go to restaurants, go to bars. I just kind of miss being around people, doing things that I've been holed in for months and months and months. And I really like to just kind of be out and about. So that's kind of what I'm looking forward to most. I mean, it's kind of basic, but it's so everyday. It's such an everyday thing. I mean, I realize that like just not commuting, like even if you're just commuting, to work and then back home,
It's a,
just being
a
you're just
reason
out.
to go out. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's just a different experience than being quarantined all day, every day.
Being able to like go out without feeling anxiety
Exactly.
and socialize without wearing a mask
Right.
or Zoom.
Yeah. And I don't know. I mean, concerts too, live music,
Oh, I really miss live music.
definitely.
That was another thing that I was planning. I was planning to go to EDC. That was actually going to be my first festival ever in Vegas in May, and that too was cancelled.
Unfortunately, did you get a refund for that?
No, I still have the tickets. Like I could still use them
Oh, okay, gotcha.
whenever it's going to happen.
Yeah,
I'm planning to go.
that's good. All right, so we're back. Sorry for that quick interruption. But yeah, so as I mentioned, Josh and I are housing attorneys in New York City. It's something that's pretty important to us. Josh, do you want to explain a little bit why you got interested in housing law?
Yeah, I guess like after going to law school, I knew I didn't want to go work for the man or for corporations for big law, and yeah, I guess like wanted to do something that was real and helpful to people, and yeah, I didn't really know if I wanted to do like impact litigation or work with individual clients, but I ended up realizing that I prefer that personal collection much more.
Yeah, it's about the same for me. I don't know. I mean, I always knew I didn't want to do corporate law, and then I was in a housing clinic. It was an internship essentially in my second year, and I really enjoyed it. And I thought that it was just important work, and is also an area where you can both practice the law, but you can also organize tenants. It's kind of it's a universal issue. Everyone basically is a renter, and even people who aren't, people who own houses are still paying mortgages, so they can kind of relate. Usually, those people who are renters as well.
At some point in their life.
At some point in their lives, exactly. So, I kind of, I guess it combined my interests of just the law, but also kind of organizing in a broader social movement towards socialism, essentially.
Yeah, socialism and basically a world where people can live without anxiety on whether they'll be able to survive or not. A world where a person's ability, where a person's productivity isn't the justification for their being able to live a human, dignified life.
Exactly. This Sky and Pancake is really good.
I know, right?
Oh,
I mean, this food is really good generally.
This is like beef within the Sky and Pancake. It's like wrapped.
And it's thick.
Yeah, it's like good beef.
I mean, the bread is pretty flavorful too, and it
Yeah.
has scallions in it.
No, I really like Sky and Pancakes.
So, a little bit about the housing situation in New York City. Right now, there's been like a rolling moratorium on evictions. At the beginning of in March, the moratorium was very expensive, and yeah, I guess like there were, as time went on, the moratorium became a little bit fuzzier, and the most recent moratorium, I believe it was promulgated in June or July, and it was written very ambiguously where generally there are like two types of cases, eviction cases, non-payment and holdover, which are like for cause evictions, or when the tenancy is terminated for reasons other than non-payment of rent. And yeah, the way the new moratorium was written, it was ambiguous whether it would apply to holdovers or not. Thankfully, most the judges in New York City interpreted it as applying to holdovers, so that's what's been holding back a wave of evictions from happening. Well, I guess because they're holdovers, it wouldn't be a wave, but most of the people at risk of evictions are at risk because of non-payment of rent. But nevertheless, I mean, under normal circumstances, people shouldn't be evicted or be homeless, but especially under the given circumstances,
It's especially bad.
and it's dangerous to the individual and it's dangerous to spread. I think there was a recent study published. Who was it published? John Hopkins?
Mm-hmm.
It was published by John Hopkins that showed that there's a pretty strong correlation between evictions and spread. I'm sorry, I'm messing that up. It was
I think it was evictions are like
caused like 30,000 deaths or something.
Mhm.
I don't have like the exact number in my head right now, but extra deaths were caused because of evictions during 2020. So yeah, public health and life and safety pouring towards people not being evicted, even if it's going to cost a little bit of money for landlords.
Yeah. And it's just such a dire situation too, because basically what the government is doing is delaying.
Yeah.
They're not solving the fundamental issue, which is that someone's not being paid.
Right.
They're just kind of preventing the worst outcome in some respects, but not always even.
So
Which is eviction. But they're not actually resolving the money situation, who's getting paid and who's paying it. And the
tenancy
there's still plenty of people who can be evicted currently because of the Tenant Safe Harbor Act.
So, so the moratorium on evictions is expiring January 1st. And it's not, we haven't heard anything from Kumo about if there's going to be a new moratorium or what the terms would be like. And so right now, I think this law was passed in June. It was the Tenant Safe Harbor Act, and what it does is if you can show that you didn't pay rent because you were financially impacted by COVID, you can't be evicted for those months of rent that you didn't pay.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an affirmative defense that a tenant has a right to raise. So a landlord can sue, and if the tenant has a lawyer or is knowledgeable, they can raise that defense to non-payment of rent. And I mean, it hasn't been clearly defined what it means to be financially impacted, because that's like, as many things that can be fairly ambiguous. Like for example, let's say I have my job and Daniel loses his job, and that's why we can't pay rent anymore. Would that mean that we were financially impacted? Or would I be able to argue that my non-payment of rent, at least as far as 50% of the total rent, which we're both liable for, was a result of being financially impacted by COVID?
Right, exactly. And then there's people who fell behind on rent before COVID, and for one reason or another, couldn't find a job, or they lost income, but the landlord was trying to evict them either for the rent that they owed before COVID, or sometimes the rent they owed before COVID, but also during COVID. And that's another kind of open question. I mean, it seems that the courts are evicting those people who owed money before COVID.
Or might evict them.
Right.
I mean, definitely, like, going forward, they could be at risk of it.
It's going to happen eventually. The moratoriums are delaying those.
I need to get my water. Yeah, this food is delicious. I really like the tripe.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so one of the problems with the Tenant Safe Harbor Act is that even if it like prevents tenants from being evicted, they still owe the money to landlords going forward. So it ends up converting unpaid rent into debt to the landlords. And what that means is like, for no fault of their own, millions of people, well, I guess in New York City it would be maybe a million. I don't know how many total tenants there are in New York City, but yeah, it basically converts their rental arrears into debt. And some of them have tens of thousands of, and will have tens of thousands at the end of this crisis in unpaid rent. So that's, going to be a burden for people, going forward.
Yeah, it's going to be a huge burden. I mean, what it basically means is that they don't become homeless, which would be the worst outcome for them. It would also just not be economically sustainable or good.
It would be a catastrophe.
But they're not losing, or they're not shedding the actual money that they owe. So they're still going to be beholden to some creditor. And they're going to have to be working under stress and
wages being garnished.
Exactly.
So I have a theory that one of the ways that the moratorium, or one of the ways that they will bail out the landlords, one of the possible ways they can bail out the landlords, and is basically refinance those unpaid arrears into bank loans. And what that could do is, essentially, landlords generally can't really charge interest for unpaid loans, but banks can. So it would be a situation where banks profit, landlords get a bailout, and the tenants are screwed with debt that could last decades potentially.
Yeah. I think that's very possible. It's kind of hard to tell. We'll see what happens in a few months when the crisis is slowly alleviating. But yeah, there's definitely the solution. So far the solution they came up with was the perfect liberal solution, which is to just kind of change the consequences of the debt from eviction to you just have to pay it eventually.
Right. And it's just going to be something that's hanging over you for years and
Yeah,
years.
and it still goes to the court, there's still a process, so on its face, it's legitimate. Ignoring the fact that through no fault of their own, people fell behind, or were unable to catch up. Work as a housing attorney is, pretty stressful. It's very interesting. It's busy. What has your experience been like?
It really varies. Some judges can be relatively reasonable. Some can be very, very unreasonable and unempathetic.
Mm-hmm.
Clients, a lot of them are very stressed out. And it varies. Each client is different and has different circumstances, and some of them are very nice and sweet, and others are, really can be really difficult and temperamental. And I've had all kinds of people come through the door. Part of our job is unofficially, therapeutic in nature.
Mm-hmm.
Talking to clients and alleviating their anxiety, making them feel safe. It's not really what we do or what we're supposed to, but it's certainly something that clients expect from us.
Right.
And there's sometimes a tension between that and doing the job, because our job is to give our opinion on their situation and their options
Legally.
Yeah, our legal opinions, and that's can come in conflict with their desire to
what they want.
Get what they want, or to get some sort of comfort or anxiety alleviation, because sometimes the situation is just bad and there's no way around that.
Yeah. I also, part of my job is to kind of do a day of legal intake once a week. And the one thing you notice most is people just kind of need to vent. They need to explain what the situation is, what their grievances are. And it's very, I think, useful and therapeutic, and sometimes they're wrong or they don't really have a good shot, even if they're right.
Morally right, but legally wrong.
Correct. Yeah, exactly. But just having someone be there for them, help them, listen to them. Often, many times, they're thankful.
Yeah.
Which is, I don't know, for me, it's pretty rewarding to be able to kind of help people, I guess.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, definitely some of them are pretty thankful, and it does give a warm, fuzzy feeling to be appreciated.
Yeah.
I have one client who, I have these David Bowie earrings. They're really extra. Anyways, I was wearing them to work one time, and this client saw me wearing them, and he was a big fan of David Bowie, so he gave me a David Bowie biography as a gift, which was, a very sweet,
nice.
Very nice gift.
But then you have clients who are difficult, and they're sometimes just to understand why, sometimes they're being unreasonable. And it's difficult to navigate that situation.
Yeah,
It's really difficult to give people bad news
really
or
difficult.
just tell them something that they're not going to want to hear.
I think one of the more difficult cases, at least for me, are nuisance cases.
Mm-hmm.
Those are cases where someone's being evicted because they disturb other people. I mean, there are different types of nuisances, but I guess the one that I find particularly difficult are the ones where the tenant is actually, disturbs or harms other people or other tenants or who live there. And I've had clients who the reasons they're being evicted is because they're harassing other tenants, and
You're kind of defending behavior that you don't agree with.
exactly, and it's my job to do it, and it's it's a conflict of interest. On one hand, I understand why people don't want to live with this person or be this person's neighbor, but on the other hand, they do need to live somewhere, and it doesn't really solve. I don't really know if making this person homeless is a solution to that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's kind of, the course focus on the question of, who owes whom, who has the right, to what. The landlord has the right to get the rent in exchange for providing shelter. But it's just completely divorced from the reality, which is that people need shelter. It's good for
Society and the economy.
for everyone to have shelter. So that was, I guess just kind of a basic overview of housing law. But in our free time, we don't just think about housing. We do a lot of other things. We like to listen to music, watch a lot of TV, some anime.
Yeah, we've been watching a lot of anime in 2020.
Exactly. I got a Switch relatively recently. I've been playing a lot of that. Josh recently got Cyberpunk 2077.
Yeah. So anyone who is has been interested in Cyberpunk 2077 might be aware that there's a lot of controversies with the game. Specifically, that when it comes to old consoles old gen consoles like PS4, the game isn't very compatible with it, and there's a ton of glitches, and
So many glitches.
yeah, so many glitches. Daniel saw me playing and it just like suddenly shut down. But yeah, actually, Sony did the unprecedented move of pulling the game off its store, which I don't think Sony has ever done before, and offering people refunds. I'm not taking the refund. I actually really like the game, despite a lot of its poor performance. Although I do think the performance has gotten a little bit better with the
Patching.
patching, but still has a very long way to go. But yeah, I just really enjoy the story. Not the main story so much, but a lot of the side quests and characters and interactions. I like the gameplay. The gameplay is really fun. I like being able to hack into enemies and just like start shit that way.
I saw that you can even choose your genitals, which don't depend on the gender or sex that you choose.
Yeah,
And
the voice as well.
you can choose the voice.
Yeah,
So you could have like a feminine voice.
yeah, with a masculine. I mean, obviously it's fairly binary, but
Right.
so. But anyways, it is nice to see options. I mean, it's kind of funny because the character customization, the character build page is like fairly elaborate and detailed, but the game is played in first person. So for
You can see it.
90 to 95% of the time, you can't unless you're like driving in third person. That's the only time you have third person, and you're on a motorcycle. You're not really looking at your character. So it's kind of hard to understand why they had such detailed customization with like the jaw and the nose and whatnot.
Yeah, and you can also choose penis size apparently,
It's just big and small and medium.
and also whether it's circumcised or uncircumcised.
Wait, I don't think you can do that.
Yeah, you can.
Was that
There's
an
two
option?
options. Yeah.
I didn't notice. Oh, fuck. I didn't notice that.
Obviously, because we're Jewish, they chose the circumcised option.
I actually played a female character, which
I did anyways.
he's a good Jew. Eats pork though.
Yeah. Well, and this pork and crab meat is the perfect combination.
You know it's kosher because they balance out.
Exactly. It cancels out. So yeah. I mean, what is it? It's the last week of December. We are 9 months into COVID, a little over more than 9 months. And they just passed the second stimulus bill, which is absurd. Like the first one was in April, May.
Yeah.
So that was 7 months ago, 6 months ago.
Well, Canada has been paying $2,000 a month. In the meantime, and I'm like, well, it's kind of funny. I'm like, did I make the wrong decision leaving Canada?
Yeah. I mean, who would have thought Canada was better than the U.S. to live in? But yeah, I mean, the last stimulus we got $1,200 per person in the household. This time we get $600, which is
So
it's a total of $1,800.
that could be 2 months of car insurance.
Yeah, that's embarrassing. It's almost an insult. I mean, in New York, that depending on where you live, that's even if you have a roommate, that could be a
Half
little
your
more than
rent.
month. Yeah, that could be half your rent. That could be
Half of
600. Yeah.
Yeah, of a month of rent.
Yeah, 600 is not enough, I think, to afford rent anywhere in New York.
Yeah, unless you're like rent controlled and have been living there for decades.
Yeah, exactly. And the people who have that are able to afford anyways through Social Security and
Yeah,
whatnot.
usually older people.
Yeah. But it turns out we can thank President-elect Joe Biden for lowering that number to 600.
Yeah.
An article just came out a day or two ago showing that he was, once they had, I guess, kind of reached some sort of potential compromise, he began to push for it, even though Pelosi and Schumer
They were
still
holding out for the trillion.
they still wanted more money. And Biden said no, 900 billion is good enough. And this is, I don't remember how much the last one was. Do you remember?
Last one, I don't remember the CARES Act. I mean, they had a lot of, it was trillions of dollars because they had like a lot of it going to defense industry and, you know, other bullshit. I mean, this one has a bunch of bullshit in it too. Like, I think like 500 million goes to Israel's Iron Dome defense system. COVID relief.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm kind of morbidly curious about what Joe Biden's presidency is going to be like. I mean, with the stimulus bill, at least with the story, we've seen, I guess, a sneak preview of what he's going to do. I mean, we kind of predicted that he was going to be
Extremely centrist, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I saw a headline saying that he wanted some bigger stimulus, but I don't know. I wasn't expecting him to be this centrist. Agreeing to 900 billion.
I think it's because they got the liability waiver removed.
What do you mean? They agreed to it because they were able to get rid of that?
I think they got rid of the liability.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Which, I mean, those are absurd. There's
no question that they should not be there.
Yeah. There's no reason companies need liability waivers for this.
For not providing proper PPE equipment.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I don't think that Biden has been wasting any time to show that he's not interested in working with the left at all. There was that recent incident with the NAACP, and they had only the mildest questioning of his credentials in terms of racial justice, and he immediately became super defensive and got angry at them and yelled at them, and that wasn't something that we didn't see on the campaign scale, so it's not a big surprise. But there were a lot of people who were hoping that if the left caved in and voted for him, that he would shift a bit more to the left. And we saw the overtone window shifted to the left during the campaign, but it's pretty clear that Biden's trying to reset the overtone window to what it was before the primary.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be even worse than before the primary. I mean, it's going to be going back to Obama era, but even a bit more centrist. I mean, I don't know. I mean, politics have moved a bit, but I think fundamentally it's going to be a bit more centrist in economic policy, fiscal and monetary. I think they're gonna make do some things that make them look progressive, but they're ultimately meaningless.
Just pandering virtues in the one.
Yeah, basically. I mean, they do that kind of with their nominations. I think they also recognize that.
Well, many of the nominations are just terrible.
Yeah, I mean, many of the nominations are just bad, which is a bad sign in itself. And but the same as well, along with that, I think they also recognize that without actual pressure from many sources, progressive objectives aren't going to be accomplished.
No.
So exactly. So even these people who are appointments and who are progressive, I mean, they'll probably get something done that's better than someone who would be less progressive than them,
or at least do less damage.
Right. But they're not going to get. I mean, it's meaningless. They're not going to get much support from from Biden. They're not going to get much support from Congress. They're not going to have any sort of structure behind them to support them on the ground.
Definitely not going to get support from the courts.
Exactly. So it's kind of meaningless. I mean, I don't know. I always knew that there was no way that he could return left. Yeah, there was no way.
He was nominated specifically as a countermeasure against Bernie Sanders.
Yeah.
This is why everyone dropped out and fell behind him. as soon as he showed that he could get votes.
Yeah, no, I mean once they all dropped out, it was definitely Klobuchar and Buttigieg. I think it was one other person the same day. I was like, this is it. They're converging. They're organizing behind Biden.
And the frustrating thing about this is that they were given a freebie this election. Had COVID not happened, there's a pretty big question whether Biden could have been elected or would have been elected at all. And yeah, I mean, the frustrating aspect of that is that it allows them to pretend that Trump was an anomaly and that there's nothing really structurally wrong in this country, and that people still want the same old centrism that's not solving any of the problems.
Yeah, it's I mean it's absurd. They're strutting around, like, oh, we want to mandate, we defeated Trump, we brought respect back to America.
They made America great again.
Exactly. But they have just completely discounted the left. They also don't recognize that they won because of COVID and because of
Trump just really, really fucked it up.
Yeah, and because of George Floyd as well. But COVID was a huge factor. I mean, Biden was losing not only in the primary, but I think in national polls. He was doing okay because of name recognition, but it wasn't great. And there was, I'm convinced that he would have lost if COVID hadn't happened.
Yeah, and the thing is that the things that need to be addressed are not unreasonable. If you look at something as basic as the wage rate as compared to inflation, it has been going down since the 80s. Student loans have been increasing, and it's been causing them a lot of pressure. We have the opioid epidemic, and which is a result of the problems of the privatized healthcare system. We have, a really broken medical care system and medical health insurance system that leaves a lot of people without access to medical care. And none of those issues that are very real are being addressed by Biden.
No.
And won't be addressed by Biden.
No, I mean, Biden was, I think he was the one pushing for like $10,000 student loan forgiveness. And I think that was just for people who had taken out private loans, which is good, obviously, but very minimal. And that's not, probably not making that much of a dent in the debt owed by students. And that's just kind of one example.
Do you remember Kamala's absurd proposal for student debt relief?
What was it again?
It was, I remember, if you got a Pell Grant and started a business in a low-income community that ran for 3 years, then you may be eligible for $20,000 in student loan relief.
Oh my God!
And it's just
so small, like so specific.
It's so narrow.
Yeah.
And even for the few people who would qualify for that, it is also an incredibly small amount.
Yeah.
So it's a very high bar with a very low payout.
Yeah, it's absurd. And I mean, now she's vice president.
Yeah, I mean, she was deeply unpopular on the campaign trail.
Yeah, she didn't win anything. Buttigieg got Secretary of Transportation.
God.
So good.
This guy is going to be around forever.
Yeah, he said this was like a historic appointment because he's the first openly gay secretary.
Of anything?
I think so. Openly. But he's not going to do anything that's particularly good.
Or historic.
Yeah, like he's going to be, a secretary. I mean, it's 2020. He's a white man working for Democratic administration.
I mean, honestly, the bigger problem with him is his politics.
Yeah.
And, his career just being like just a terrible, incredibly, this person has been building their resume their whole life.
Yeah.
From working at McKinley, which is one of the most evil companies in the world, to just doing a fuck terrible job as mayor of the band. Having controversies and mishandling issues relating to police brutality.
Yeah, it's not great. Recently I've been, I guess for the past few months now, I'm a big fan of hip hop. Just kind of listen to all parts of it. So I've been introducing it to Josh. And last night we actually listened to an album
Little Dominique's Nosebleed.
called Little Dominique's Nosebleed by a rapper named the Koreatown Oddity. He's from LA, Koreatown. And it's kind of a jazz rap or abstract rap, definitely very underground album. It actually kind of sounded like you could largely place it in the 2000s underground or the 90s just sound in general.
More jazzy beats.
Yeah, it's pretty jazzy. It's a kind of almost spoken word, very autobiographical, which isn't limited to a specific time period. I thought it was just really good. The beats are especially, I think, really interesting and dynamic.
There's some pretty funny vocals.
Yeah.
Some lyrics, pretty funny lyrics.
This.
I think it was like that song, Attention Challenge. There's like a line. Like the whole song is like, do blah blah blah, do something for attention. Do something for attention. And there's like one line where it's like, be white and then's good for attention. I thought it was pretty funny.
It was really good. I like autobiographical style. It was engaging, I think, lyrically. And I don't know, it was kind of unlike anything I've heard in the past few years from new hip hop. It certainly sounded familiar to a lot of older hip hop that I've listened to, but also fresh and new and it was really good. I recommend it to anyone who's a big fan of hip hop or jazz rap or anything like that.
We also listened to Animals album yesterday. For anyone who's a fan of Pink Floyd. When I was in high school, I used to listen to Pink Floyd a lot, and Daniel.
Born in the wrong generation.
Yeah, I wouldn't go that far. But
wrong generation.
Now you're just shaming me. But see, I'm blushing. I'm just red all the time. I think it's that Russian Slavic genetics.
Freaking Slavs.
Yeah. So Daniel, he hasn't learned about Dead Rock apparently, or hasn't had much exposure.
Yeah, just a tiny bit from my dad, and that's it.
His dad just didn't show him enough Dead Rock.
Exactly.
Growing up. Anyway, so we decided to just kind of go through the entire discography of Pink Floyd, from start to finish, but not chronologically. I don't actually know how I was deciding to introduce. I just paired two albums together, and we would listen to both albums that night. And I would usually look for balance, where it was one album that was good and one album that I didn't like as much. And this way, there would be a balanced evening experience. And I would give some history context because I'm a bit of a Pink Floyd nerd, and that is my favorite Dead Rock band. But last night we listened to Animals. What did you think of it, and how do you compare it to the other albums you listened to?
I enjoyed it. It's been too long since I listened to the other albums. We're gonna have to listen to that tomorrow. I think I listen to in hip hop. The songs are pretty short, especially these days. They're
One
like
thing
less than
before I
3 minutes.
interrupt, a point of clarification. We only listened to one album last night because the night before we listened to also one album, which was Obscure by Clouds.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, it's dad rock from the 70s. Some of these songs are really long. I mean, what was the other one? 28 minutes? 26?
The longest on this album or like the general?
Just this one.
18.
Oh, 18. Okay. 18?
Yeah.
Okay.
Dogs.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. And the songs are really long, but what I like about them is that the progression is always progressing. Like, you don't, in hip hop, it's often just kind of a cycled beat. Even if it's kind of complex and there is progression in it, eventually it kind of goes back. You can't basically sustain a song without kind of significantly changing the beat, at which point you just have a different song. Whereas in this, I think it flows very nicely.
Into a different sounding kind of song.
Exactly, but within the same song.
Yeah. While still like feeling cohesive.
Exactly. Which is possible in hip hop, and there's plenty of songs that do that, but it's just more difficult, I think, to pull off.
Especially at that length.
Yeah, exactly. Although that might be true for anything, I don't really know. Or for not anything, but a lot of things. But yeah.
Most rock songs are shorter than Pink Floyd songs.
Yeah. But, I don't know, I enjoyed it. What year did it come out?
I want to say 77 or 78.
Yeah, it sounded a little older. I think I like some of the earlier stuff. I think,
Dark Side.
yeah, I don't know, electric guitar, at least the riffs, I don't know, the 80s guitar sound isn't for me as much.
They have a lot of acoustic though on.
Yeah, no, I mean, and it's not just, I don't dislike it entirely. It's just not as appealing to me, but it was good, and this did have a lot of acoustics, so that, particularly this album wasn't
I think you're
that bad, but I
The
did.
Wall. I think that was the one that you were like, not really your thing.
Yeah, exactly, super 80s.
Except you're really like comfortably numb, which is a very basic thing.
That's true.
Just annoy me.
What can I say? But yeah, no, I've been enjoying our lesson. I don't have much exposure to dad rock, but I do like a lot of music, or not a lot of music, but I do like some music from the 70s.
How do you like the earlier psychedelic stuff?
That's fine. I don't know. It doesn't. I like it. I just don't think it does anything specifically for me.
A little too weird, a little too off balance.
I don't even know if it's that. I just think it's.
Whatever.
Yeah, like it's not bad, but it's not. It doesn't draw me in, which I don't think is for any reason in particular.
I think you said Metal was your favorite album, right? So far.
Yeah, Metal was good. I mean, I like. I don't know. I mean, psychedelic stuff I do like, but just not as much. I think is a little bit later.
It just made me think of that Travis Scott song. How did the line go? Psychedelics make me crazy.
Yeah,
Something like that.
psychedelics make me going crazy, something like that.
Yeah. Astral World.
Yeah. Yeah, so other than, listening to music, Josh and I have been in a reading group together with our other friend from law school. And lately, the last book we've been reading has been Capitalism and Freedom
Yeah, by Milton.
by Milton Friedman, the classic
Neoliberal.
capitalist economist.
Yeah, definitely like one of the more influential neoliberal economists.
And I don't know, what do you think of it?
I mean, I guess like before I get into that, just some context of why we chose this book. We're right wing, surprise, no, just kidding. The real reason is before that we read Naomi Klein's Shock Doctrine, which is about how neoliberalism takes advantage of crisis and eventually started manufacturing crises in order to essentially push forth neoliberal policies that would otherwise be deeply unpopular um, and it would be in a context or the undemocratic nature through which those policies are enacted is obscured by the rhetoric, pro-democracy rhetoric that often surrounds um, these crises. Like, for example, with Iraq and how America framed the war in Iraq at the beginning as a war for freedom, and they're going to bring democracy to Iraq after they toppled Saddam Hussein. But then, because the populace would never vote for austerity under those circumstances, they had, especially under those circumstances, they had to actually prevent democratic institutions from forming or functioning in order to push through those policies.
Yeah, so we decided to read Milton Friedman to kind of go to the source.
Because she mentions him as being incredibly influential
Yeah,
in this process.
he's kind of the one who, in a way, theorized the shock doctrine, although he didn't call it that, and I don't think it was a specific doctrine he developed. But I don't know. I mean, reading this has been interesting. We're only 3 chapters in. What's interesting, I think, is that it sounds so familiar, and I can't tell if that's because it's just basic or if it's because he's the reason for that.
Yeah. I mean, what were the first chapter we read a while back? What was that one about?
I think that was just kind of his
The intro.
Yeah, like, wasn't he talking about freedom or?
Yeah, I think he was talking about freedom and what was he saying? Oh yeah, I think he was just like talking about how
He's talking about how the economy affects politics.
yeah, the economy is not separated from politics, which is something most leftists know, but just I understand it a little differently than he does. And his whole idea is that like why he argues for the private sector in the first chapter is because he believes that the private sector represents a sort of separation of powers and a diffusion of power in the same way that there are different branches of government as a separation of power.
Yeah, basically you can have people cooperating without mandatory cohesion, or not just coercion, but conformity.
Oh, you're thinking of the later line in the book?
Yeah, the market is good because you can kind of do whatever you want as long as people are willing to pay for it, and people are free to pay for it if they want to.
Right. Rather than just like everything is a monopoly owned by the government.
Right. And I don't know, one thing, I mean, like you were saying, he kind of understands politics, the intersection between politics and economy differently than leftists do. Basically, he says that, politics directly affects the economy and how business is run, how the markets work and function. And so politicians especially, will talk about how certain economic things aren't really important, just focus on the politics, so they just don't talk about the economic stuff. I don't know what an example would be, like, it's kind of hard to imagine because I don't think it was true even then, but I don't know, talking about how like taxes might affect the ability of businesses to grow or something like that. No one really talks about that in politics, I think.
Which is not true.
Which is not true, but for leftists, it's a bit different. I think it's because we see
as the capitalist class as being able to exercise political power through the economy, but also with their economic power, capture and control the state.
Exactly.
Which is actually one of the things that like so far Melton hasn't addressed, and that is he doesn't seem like when he talks about the separation of power of the economy from politics, he doesn't seem to um, I know address the fact that like a lot of politicians, move. There's a lot of revolving door between the corporate world and politics, but also that a lot of politicians are in the pockets of corporate interests, and so like that separation is undermined by that connection.
Yeah, and I mean, we were well, not that far into it, but he hasn't addressed it. I doubt he will. I'm sure someone asked him about it once, and he probably had some answer. Although we should look it up.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I mean, it's strange. Like he says one thing where it's like nothing, no like technical achievement or something has come from centralized government. And he wrote this in like in early 1960s, which wasn't much long after the Soviets sent
A percent to space.
this person into space, first satellite into space. Like
I mean, also like public funding is like everywhere in the U.S.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
the Cold War.
So he's just kind of talking out of his ass.
I mean, he also like said something about how like recessions and booms and bust cycles are caused by the government.
Yeah.
But then, like in the following chapter where he talks about the Great Depression, he says it's the government's fault because the Federal Reserve didn't intervene with monetary policy. So, is it their fault because they caused the crisis, or is it their fault because they didn't help alleviate their crisis? Those are not consistent. Those are not consistent positions.
Maybe he would say it's their fault because they caused it and then didn't help alleviate it.
But he had no explanation for how he thinks they caused it.
That's true. But I don't know. I'm not going to speak for him. Yeah, it's been a pretty good book. Pretty illuminating. I'm kind of curious to see
Where it goes.
where it goes, who it's directly influenced, how it's reflected in U.S. current contemporary U.S. politics, and if it's still. I mean, it's still certainly there are a lot of ideas and they're dominant, but I think some of the austerity stuff, for example, like just the idea of austerity or cuts to public spending during an economic crisis, are certainly less popular than they were in the last crisis. I don't know if they'll be stopped, but I am curious.
I mean, the last crisis, Occupy Wall Street. There was
Yeah.
a lot of like deeply anti-austerity.
That's true. Yeah, it's been good. And I don't know. I mean, I think we're getting down to the end of this food. Let's talk about the year in review.
I mean, it's more like the food got to the end of us.
Yeah, it's true. We're pretty full.
We're stuffed. The food was really good, by the way.
It's delicious.
Yeah, you're in review, you said?
Yeah.
Okay, a good way to wrap up. So, what a great year. Kidding. It was a bum year.
Yeah, I mean, what it's December. We've spent 9 months inside our apartment. We had a few months out in the summer, but even then, nowhere to go, so you're just kind of walking around. So work has been stressful, interesting. It's hard to separate work from home.
Especially because we're always working from home.
Exactly.
I guess actually the first few months of work with the complete shutdown of the courts, we literally had nothing to do.
Yeah.
Just to lie around and wait for the inevitable deluge of work that we were dreading.
Yeah.
And being depressed because I feel like that's the first thing you do for the first 3 months before you adjust.
Yeah. And now it's very busy. The Harlem Court is actually just about to open up.
What's about to open up?
Harlem.
What?
The Harlem Community Justice Center.
Oh, sure.
So they're still trying to evict people, still trying to enforce these evictions. We're still not even, the vaccine just came out. So we're 9 months into it, there's a vaccine, but it's not clear if people are going to start being evicted January 4th in New York. And
I really hope there's another moratorium.
yeah, I mean,
We really, really need it.
it's pretty necessary.
So many people are dying from COVID.
Fortunately, we've so far have not contracted it. We're hoping that we can make it till we get the vaccine.
Yeah, I mean, this has been a really crazy year. I mean, COVID definitely is probably the most memorable thing that happened this year. But there has been a lot of
It's a very memorable year, to say the least.
yeah, we started with the assassination of a major general, Iranian general.
Yeah.
Which was like a mini international crisis. Then
God.
Kobe Bryant died in a helicopter accident. Then we had massive forest fires in Australia, and then we had COVID, the George Floyd protests,
Which
and
were crazy. I mean, that was the next most notable event of the year.
yeah, and they had just a bunch of uprisings all over the country, and the police responding with, in some cases, incredible brutality. We had the deployment of
National Guard.
National Guard. We had the deployment of BORTAC and other very fascist looking units. Kidnapping people off the streets in Portland. We had the forest fires in California, the sky in San Francisco turning orange.
Yeah.
You remember that happened this year? We had the primary. I forgot about the primary.
Oh God, yeah, who even remembers that? That was so long ago. We had the freaking election.
The election, yeah. I mean, I guess the good news is Trump is not president anymore.
We had to go through months of speculation that Trump was going to steal the election.
Yeah, that was pretty
Very
stressful.
stressful.
And then the night of the election, for a bit there, it looked like he might actually pull a win.
Yeah. Oh God.
And then the only and the alternative being Biden, which was probably one of the worst, not including Bloomberg, the worst candidate that was running.
Yeah.
And yeah, no hope that any of the issues that led to Trump becoming president in the first place are going to be addressed.
Very bleak. I mean, everyone I know is not happy.
No. I mean, it was nice, the day after the election, it was nice weather, and there were people
When
celebrating.
they announced that he won, it was a few days after.
Oh, it was a few days after, yeah. And, of course, not the day
It
after.
was Saturday. They announced that Biden won. That was nice. Very nice weather.
And people outside celebrating. I mean,
This is a huge party.
yeah, just a huge party, and just seeing people being happy. They were wearing masks, so it was a little bit better, but obviously, crowded is not ideal, but at least it's outside. But anyways, it was really nice to see people being happy after such a bleak year of just bad news after bad news.
Yeah. It was
Even if it was such a minor victory.
yeah, it was so bad. It's Biden won. It's basically Trump lost was the victory.
Yeah, and it is a victory, but the problems are still there.
Super depressing.
And maybe the next one is going to be even worse. Who knows?
Yeah, well, we'll see. We got next year. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. I mean, we got, this economic crisis, which still hasn't fully played out.
Yeah.
There's going to be something, I swear there's going to be some sort of crash or something whenever things start to open up. There's something that's going to bottom out. I just don't know what.
Yeah.
And Biden is going to be insufficient to address it. I think there's definitely going to be cuts at state and local levels to public spending, meaning less welfare.
It's going to be a hard year.
Yeah, I think it's
2021.
going to be bleak. I think there's going to eventually be a wave of evictions, probably smaller than what could be, but I still think there's going to be a wave, and certainly there's going to be a wave of defaults or people just going into debt to their landlords or to whoever.
So unnecessary. Such a rich country.
And
Why
they're-
do people have to live with their, just with a foot on their neck?
And they're existing regardless. I mean, there's this kind of invisible, ethereal agreement that doesn't exist in reality or physically.
What are you talking about?
Debt.
Oh yeah.
But these, you're in debt, but you're still living. You're still buying things. Like everything you do is
The same.
current,
Right.
but you owe this money in the
Because-
future.
Because you just were swept up with a wave, a wave that was beyond you.
Exactly.
And I mean, like, why do we even live in a society if we can come together to like protect ourselves?
Yeah, exactly.
And also like I think COVID really like hits home how ill-suited the United States is at handling collective crises.
Yeah,
And it really does make you
there's no social cohesion.
there's just little social cohesion and very little solidarity and
I mean, there's no faith in the government. Like nobody.
justifiably.
Yeah, like there's
I mean, the elites just don't give a fuck. They think they can get away with it, and as long as they get a profit, and many of them made tremendous profits in 2020. They don't care what happens because they think that they're invincible and they'll survive no matter what. And that's probably the same attitude they're taking towards global warming.
yeah.
They'll just pay their way out of
Having to deal with the consequences, and it's going to be us bearing the costs.
Hopefully they get their just desserts. All right. Well, I think that will conclude it for now. Cool. That was our mukbang. 2 Jews, 1 Christmas. We hope you liked it. We hope you appreciated our progressive
Thank you for
delicas.
watching.
Thank you for watching.
Have a wonderful